The last thing my father ever said to me before I left home was a sentence I will never forget. "You're a disgrace to this family." He didn't shout it. He didn't even look angry. He said it calmly, like it was simply a fact. Then he pointed at the front door. "If you leave this house tonight, don't ever come back." So I left. One suitcase, $30 in my wallet. No plan, no safety net. 10 years later, my parents were standing outside the gates of my mansion, begging to come in. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who said no. In my family, there were two kinds of people: successes and disappointments. My older brother Daniel had always been the success. Top grades, perfect career path. Exactly the kind of son my parents loved talking about at family gatherings. "Daniel will run the firm someday," my father often said proudly. Our family owned a mid-sized accounting company. Stable, predictable, respectable. To my parents, life had a simple blueprint: work hard, follow the safe path, never embarrass the family. Daniel fit perfectly into that blueprint. I didn't. I was the creative one, the one who spent hours building ideas, designing websites, sketching business concepts in notebooks. None of that impressed my parents. To them, creativity meant instability. "Artists struggle," my mother used to say. "Smart people choose secure careers." For years, I tried to make them understand my ideas, but every conversation ended the same way. They didn't see ambition. They saw irresponsibility. When I was 21, I built something quietly in my bedroom. An online platform designed to help small digital sellers build their brands and storefronts easily. At first, it was just a side project, something I coded late at night. But after a few months, something interesting happened. People started using it, then recommending it, then paying for it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had built something real. Around that same time, my father called a family meeting. He had already decided my future. "You'll start at the firm next month," he said. No discussion, no question, just an announcement. It was the first time in my life I said no. The conversation escalated faster than I expected. My father believed the accounting firm was security, legacy, respect. To him, my startup idea looked childish. "Online platforms fail every day," he said. "You're throwing your life away." "I'm building something," I replied. My mother shook her head. "You're embarrassing this family." That sentence hurt more than anything else. Not anger, disappointment, which somehow felt worse. The argument ended with my father saying something that changed everything. "You're not refusing the firm because of some business idea." He leaned forward. "You're refusing because you're jealous of Daniel." I stared at him. "What?" "You've always hated the fact he's more successful." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. But the way my parents looked at me, I realized something terrifying. They actually believed it. Then my father said the words that ended my life in that house. "You're a disgrace to this family." Silence filled the room. My mother didn't stop him. Daniel didn't defend me. My father pointed at the door. "If you leave tonight, don't come back." For a moment, I thought he would calm down. He didn't. So I packed a suitcase, and I left. I thought being disowned would be the worst moment of my life, but I was wrong. Because 6 months later, my parents did something even worse, something that proved they never expected me to succeed. They erased me from the family completely. The first night after I left, I slept in my car behind a 24-hour grocery store. Not because I was dramatic, because I genuinely had nowhere else to go. I had one suitcase, a laptop, $30, and the kind of pride that feels noble until it starts getting cold. At 2 in the morning, I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go and stared at the ceiling fabric above me, listening to rain tap lightly against the windshield. That was the first time it hit me fully. They meant it. My father hadn't thrown me out to make a point. My mother hadn't stood there silent because she expected me to come back before midnight. They had chosen their son, their firm, their version of success, and their family image over me. And whatever love I had once believed was unconditional had conditions after all. The next morning, I drove to the gym where I still had a basic monthly membership and showered in a stall that smelled faintly like bleach and steam. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and made a list. People I could maybe ask for help, places I could maybe stay, expenses I could survive, things I could sell. I called 3 friends before noon. 2 didn't answer. 1 did. Her name was Nora. We had been friends since sophomore year, and if she was shocked by the state I was in, she had the decency not to say it out loud. "You can stay on my couch for a few days," she said. A few days. At the time, that sounded like rescue. Later, I would understand it as the opening scene of the hardest 2 years of my life. I found out quickly that my parents hadn't simply thrown me out. They had curated the story. That was the second betrayal. The first was the disowning. The second was making sure the family heard a version that protected them. According to my aunt, who called me 3 days later sounding equal parts nosy and concerned, I had stormed out over a job opportunity. According to my mother, I had become unstable and obsessed with proving something. According to one of my cousins, my father said I had chosen ego over family. Ego. That word stayed with me because people with power love calling self-respect ego when it appears in the wrong child. And there it was again. The family narrative. Daniel was loyal. I was difficult. My father was reasonable. I was impulsive. My mother was heartbroken. I was proud. No one mentioned the sentence that mattered most. Don't ever come back. People rarely repeat the parts that make them sound cruel. They summarize, soften, edit. The same way institutions do when they want to survive their own behavior. Nora found me staring at my phone after one of those calls and asked quietly, "Do you want me to tell you to block them?" I looked up. "Would you?" "Yes," she said, "but I don't think you're ready yet." She was right. I wasn't. Some stupid part of me still believed my parents would calm down, that one of them would call and say, "You made your point. Come home." No one did. Instead, 6 months later, they did something worse. I didn't learn about it from them. Of course not. I learned about it from an attorney's assistant who had once done filing work for our family company and still remembered me as the daughter who was always polite. She called because she thought I should know. Her voice was low, careful. "I probably shouldn't be saying this," she told me, "but your father updated the estate documents." My stomach tightened. "What kind of update?" A pause. Then, "He removed you." For a second, I didn't understand what she meant. "Remove me from what?" "Everything," she said quietly. "The house, any trust interests, any future family business rights, any inheritance language." He had rewritten the documents as if I no longer existed. Not in anger, maybe, which somehow made it worse. He had done it formally, calmly, with legal precision. He hadn't just disowned me emotionally. He had erased me administratively. I remember sitting on the edge of Nora's couch after that call, staring at the wall while traffic hummed outside her apartment window. There's a unique cruelty in being written out on paper. Arguments can be denied. Harsh words can be reframed later. But paperwork has a colder kind of honesty. My father didn't expect me to come back. He expected me to disappear. My brother called that evening. That alone told me something. He only intervened when things had already gone too far for him to comfortably ignore. His voice sounded measured, controlled, the same way it always did when he wanted to appear above conflict. "I heard you spoke to someone from the office." I laughed without humor. "So that's what this is? Damage control?" "No," he said. "I'm trying to make sure you don't make this worse. Make this worse. For them, apparently. Not for me." I stood by Nora's kitchen counter, gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. "Dad erased me from the family estate." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You left. He threw me out. He gave you a choice." That sentence told me exactly where he stood, which is to say, where he had always stood. Not on the side of truth. On the side of the structure that benefited him most. I went quiet, because suddenly something old and ugly clicked into place. Daniel wasn't just passive. He was invested. My father's firm. My father's approval. My father's future plans. All of it led to him. And if my absence made that inheritance cleaner, that legacy smoother, that path less contested, then my banishment wasn't just tolerable. It was useful. "Did you tell him to do it?" I asked. The silence on the line was so small most people wouldn't have noticed it. "I did." "No," Daniel said. "Too fast. Too smooth. Too practiced." I didn't have proof then. But from that moment on, a seed was planted. And years later, when I found out what he did next, that silence would come back to me like a prophecy. The mythology of entrepreneurship leaves out a lot. People love the before and after, the garage startup, the sleepless nights, the breakthrough deal, the triumphant interview about resilience. What they rarely show is the middle, the humiliating middle. The part where you eat microwave noodles in someone else's kitchen at midnight and try not to calculate how long you've overstayed. The part where you send 24 emails and get one polite rejection. The part where freelance invoices take 45 days to land, but rent is due in 6. My platform idea still existed. I kept working on it. Not because I was wildly confident, because it was the only thing I had left that felt like mine. The concept was simple in theory, a design and storefront system that helps small online sellers look professional without needing a full agency. Templates, branding tools, easy customization, back-end guidance. At 21, I thought that was enough. At 22, I learned the market doesn't care whether your idea is smart if you can't afford infrastructure. Hosting costs mattered. User testing mattered. Interface improvements mattered. And all of it cost time and money I barely had. So I took whatever work I could get. Barista shifts. Contract design work. Data entry for a legal transcription company that paid so badly it almost felt satirical. Nora let me stay 3 months. Then her landlord started asking questions. I moved into a sublet with 2 strangers and a broken heater, then into a room above a laundromat where the walls vibrated every time the industrial dryers ran. At one point, I worked 48 hours between Friday morning and Sunday night and still barely covered software fees. People later would call that period my grind. I hated that word. Grinding is for coffee beans. This was survival. The first person who took my platform seriously was a man named Carl Mendez. Small angel investor, former e-commerce operator, a friend of a friend who agreed to look at my deck mostly because he liked helping young founders learn. I wore my only blazer, took 2 buses, and arrived 20 minutes early to a coffee shop in a business district where even the air smelled expensive. Carl was kind. sharper than I expected, but kind. He asked good questions, hard questions, questions no one in my family had ever bothered asking because they dismissed the idea before understanding it. How do you acquire sellers at a low cost? What stops larger template platforms from absorbing this feature set? Why you? I answered as well as I could. At the end, Carl closed the deck and looked at me for a long moment. This is real, he said. My chest tightened. No one in my family had ever said that about my work. Not once. Then he added, but you're too early and too alone. That sentence almost broke me, because he wasn't insulting me. He was identifying the exact shape of the problem. I had the idea. I had the work ethic. I had some product. What I didn't have was support, capital, or a team. All the things someone from a better family gets to call starting conditions. Carl didn't invest, but he introduced me to 3 people and gave me the best advice anyone had offered yet. Don't build like you're trying to prove your family wrong. Build like you're trying to stay alive long enough to be right later. I wrote that down. Years later, I still knew it by heart. 6 months after that meeting, something impossible happened. A small business publication ran a feature on promising next-generation innovation in professional services tech. And there, halfway down the page, smiling beside a clean corporate headshot and a quote about scalable digital tools for small sellers, was my brother Daniel. Not as founder, as strategic advisor to a startup with a concept painfully, nauseatingly familiar. My fingers actually went numb holding the phone. I clicked the article. The company had a generic name, polished landing page, early seed backing, and the product description, reframed, smoothed, corporatized, was my idea. Not every detail. He wasn't stupid enough for that. But the bones were mine. Template-based brand systems for overlooked digital sellers, streamlined interface, modular storefront tools, advisory upsells, even the language around bridging the gap between talent and presentation was close enough to make me feel sick. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the second ring, almost cheerful. Hey, what is this? A beat. Then he knew. Because guilty people always know the exact "this" you mean. You saw the article. You stole my idea. He laughed softly, not cruelly, worse, patiently, like I was being immature. It's not your idea anymore. I couldn't breathe for a second. What does that mean? It means ideas evolve, he said, and some people know how to execute. There it was. The family line, translated through startup language. You didn't lose because you were betrayed. You lost because you were slower, weaker, less chosen. I said nothing for so long he finally filled the silence. You left, he said. You walked away from the family. You don't get to complain that we moved on. We, not he. We, meaning my father knew. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not the theft in language as stark as I felt it. But enough. Enough to let Daniel build a cleaner, funded version of what I had once described at our kitchen table before they called me a disgrace. That was the moment my anger became permanent. Not loud, permanent. Because if they could erase me from the family, steal the idea I was surviving on, and still cast themselves as practical, then nothing about what happened to me had ever been accidental. I wasn't disowned because I failed. I was disowned because they preferred a world where my brother inherited everything cleanly, including my future. I thought my parents wanted me gone because I embarrassed them. Then Daniel stole my platform idea, and I realized they hadn't just rejected my future. They had redistributed it to him. There was a week after the article where I genuinely considered quitting, not taking a break, not reassessing, quitting, getting a stable job somewhere unglamorous, paying my bills, and allowing the rest of my life to shrink into something manageable. You can survive almost anything if you stop believing you deserve more. That's the dangerous point. Not when you're devastated, when you're tired enough to settle. Nora found me sitting on the floor of my room surrounded by printouts, old decks, and coding notes I hadn't touched in days. She sat down beside me and didn't speak for a while. Then she picked up the article with Daniel's face on it. You going to let him have it? I looked at her. I can't outfund them. Maybe not. I can't outnetwork them. Maybe not. I laughed bitterly. That's very inspiring. Nora set the article down. You know what you can do? What? Outlast them. The word landed quietly. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just true. My family had always counted on one thing, that I would break neatly, that I would absorb the hit, make practical adjustments, and become another cautionary tale about youthful arrogance. They had never built their strategy around me surviving long enough to become inconvenient. So I stood back up. Not because hope suddenly flooded in, because spite can function as scaffolding until something stronger appears. And sometimes, that's enough. The first paying client who changed my life was a woman named Priya, who sold handmade stationery online and had been ghosted by 2 different agencies after paying deposits they didn't earn. She found me through a tiny forum thread where I had posted free advice under a fake username because I was too ashamed of my life to market myself properly. She messaged, "Can you actually help, or are you another person selling templates with no support?" I stared at that line for a full minute, then replied, "I can help, but I'm not cheap enough to lie to you." She hired me, a small contract. Not enough to change my life. Enough to prove someone outside pity or obligation would pay for my mind. I built her storefront, reworked her brand, simplified her checkout flow. Within 2 months, she referred 4 other clients. One of them referred 8 more over the next year. And that, much more than my original product, became the real beginning. Not scale, trust. Trust from people who needed exactly what I knew how to give. While Daniel played founder in press pieces, and my family curated their neat little myth of success, I built the thing they thought I couldn't. Not fast, not cleanly, but real and real. Unlike legacy and favoritism and polished family narratives, compounds. The first time my company crossed 6 figures in annual revenue, my father called me. Not to apologize, not to reconcile, because something had gone wrong in the family business. And what he asked for next proved that after disowning me, erasing me, and stealing from me, they still believed I existed to be useful. The first time my father called after nearly 3 years of silence, I almost didn't answer. His name on my screen felt like seeing a ghost in daylight. Too familiar to ignore, too unwelcome to trust. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then answered without saying hello. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. "You sound well." It was such a strange opening line that I nearly laughed. As if he were calling an old colleague. As if the last time we spoke, he hadn't pointed at the front door and erased me from his life. "I'm working," I said. Another pause, then he got to it. "The firm has had some complications." Complications. Wealthy families love that word. It can mean fraud, debt, tax trouble, lawsuits, or a son with bad judgment wrapped in a clean suit. It never means something small. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the unfinished client brief on my desk. "What kind of complications?" He hesitated. Cash flow issues. There it was. The first honest lie. Because cash flow issues is what people say when they want money from you without admitting panic. I'm sure Daniel can handle it, I said. Silence. Longer this time. Then my father replied very carefully, Daniel is part of the issue. My hand tightened around the phone, and in that moment, without fully understanding why, I knew this call mattered. Because my father would never have said that unless the ground under him was already cracking. We met 2 days later in a cafe 20 minutes outside the city. Not my idea. His. Neutral territory, I suppose. Or maybe he simply couldn't bear the humiliation of sitting in my office while asking for something. When I arrived, he was already there. Gray suit, blue tie, the same watch he'd worn for years. But something about him looked diminished. Not physically smaller, just less certain. He stood when I approached. I stayed standing until I heard what he wanted. My father gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. No, I said. Start. His jaw tightened. Even then, even after years, he still hated being denied the structure of his own conversations. But he adapted quickly. Our firm is under pressure, he said. A major client pulled out. We had a liquidity gap. Daniel made some decisions that... He paused. Didn't help. I said nothing. He took a breath. We may need strategic restructuring. There it was again. Beautiful language for ugly truths. Say what you actually mean, I said. His eyes flicked up to mine. For a temporary period, we need access to outside capital. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictably them. 3 years earlier, I was too unstable to trust with my own future. Now my capital counted as outside, useful, but not personal, neutral enough to ask for. And beneath that polished corporate wording, I could hear the truth very clearly. We need your money. I sat down then, not because I wanted to help, because I wanted details. How bad is it? My father looked out the cafe window before answering. That depends. On what? On whether Daniel can recover a deal he mishandled. There was that word again. Mishandled. Not betrayed. Not stole. Not sabotaged. Just mishandled. I folded my hands on the table. What exactly did Daniel do? My father gave me the version he clearly wanted me to hear first. A new digital services subsidiary. Aggressive expansion. A product direction that overcommitted resources and underdelivered on timing. Vendor issues. Burned cash. Client confidence shaken. As he spoke, the shape of it became disturbingly familiar. Digital services, product direction, expansion based on borrowed confidence. I stared at him, then asked very quietly, Was it my platform idea? My father's face changed, only for a second, but it changed. And that was enough. He knew. Maybe not all the details, maybe not every theft, every slide deck, every stolen line of thinking, but enough. Enough that he recognized the accusation before I finished saying it. He didn't deny it immediately, which was worse than denial. Finally, he said, The market moved faster than expected. I laughed. A short, cold sound. That's what you're going with? He sat straighter. You're being emotional. There it was. My whole life in 2 words. When truth became inconvenient, I became emotional. When they stole, redirected, excluded, or erased, they became practical. It was almost comforting how little they changed. My father finally said what he had been circling. Daniel had spun off an internal service line using my concept. At first, it worked well enough to impress the board. They pitched it as innovation. A modern extension of the family firm. Digital storefront strategy. Branding integration. advisory packages for growing independent sellers. In other words, my work, repackaged with better funding and my brother's name on the paper. But Daniel had treated the concept like status theater instead of infrastructure. He overpromised outcomes, hired too quickly, burned money on visibility before stability. And worst of all, he attached the family firm's credibility to projections he couldn't deliver. When the major clients left, the old firm got dragged with it. My father didn't say it plainly, but I could hear it under every sentence. Daniel had endangered the very legacy they threw me out to protect. And suddenly the whole thing became sickly poetic. The son they chose over me, the heir they trusted with everything, the one they used to justify my humiliation. He was now the person unraveling the house they built around him. I should have felt satisfied. I didn't. Not yet. Because there was still one question burning through everything else. "Why are you here?" I asked. My father went still. I kept going. "You threw me out. You erased me from the estate. You let Daniel steal from me. So why are you here?" He met my eyes for the first time since I sat down, and finally he said it. "Because you built something real. Not an apology, not you were right, not I was wrong. Just the barest possible recognition that reality had become too expensive to deny. I expected him to ask for a loan. He didn't. Not exactly. He wanted a partnership. Or rather, he wanted to dress need up as collaboration. He described a scenario where my company could strategically align with the remaining assets of the family firm. My resources, my product architecture, my leadership, their brand history, their existing client base. If I said yes, I wouldn't simply be rescuing them. I would be legitimizing the transfer of my own stolen future back into their hands. I saw it instantly, the beauty of the plan from his perspective. No apology required, no public reckoning, no admission that they had destroyed me and cannibalized my work. Instead, a merger, a reconciliation on paper, a story everyone could repeat later about bringing the family back together. I looked at my father and understood, maybe more clearly than ever before, that people like him do not return when they miss you. They return when they can still make use of what they once rejected. "You want my company," I said. His expression tightened. "That's a childish way to frame it." "No," I said. "It's the accurate way." He slid a folder across the table anyway. Projected equity structure, possible governance roles, a board seat, brand transition language. Every page smelled like entitlement dressed as sophistication. He had come to absorb me, not help me, not make peace. Absorb. Fold my independent success into the family machine so no one would ever have to say what really happened. I didn't open the folder. I pushed it back. "No." His jaw flexed. "You haven't even read it." "I don't need to." My father looked angry then. Actually angry, not because I refused the deal, because I refused the frame. People like him can tolerate rejection more easily than they can tolerate being seen clearly. "This is bigger than old resentment," he said. "I know," I replied. "It's about pattern." He stared at me. So I said it. "You disowned me when I tried to build this idea. Then Daniel stole it. Then you rewrote the family documents like I didn't exist. And now that he's failing with what he took, you want me to save him by handing it over nicely." The cafe seemed to go very quiet. My father's voice dropped. "You think too highly of your own importance in this." I smiled, and for the first time in my life, I think that smile truly unsettled him. "No," I said. "You think too little of your own behavior." Then I stood up and left. He didn't stop me. which told me the situation was even worse than he'd admitted. Desperate people usually push harder. Truly cornered people conserve pride where they can. 3 nights later, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, he texted, "We should talk before this gets uglier." That message alone almost made me delete it. Before this gets uglier. As if I were the escalation. As if he weren't the man who stole my work, benefited from my exile, and only reached out when the walls started caving in around him. Still, I agreed to meet. Not because I owed him that. Because I wanted to see him say it with his whole face. We met at his office. Not the original family firm, but the sleek annex he'd built for the digital subsidiary. Minimalist furniture, glass walls, muted art selected by someone who thought sterile meant expensive. He looked exactly the way successful men look right before failure starts showing at the edges. Good suit, expensive shoes, tired eyes. He didn't offer coffee, didn't pretend this was family. That was almost refreshing. Daniel closed the office door behind me and said, "You always did prefer theatrics." I laughed softly. "You came to me." He ignored that. For a moment, he just studied me, and I realized with a jolt that he had expected me to arrive raw, emotional, still carrying the little sister energy he could redirect. What he found instead seemed to bother him. Calm is a hard thing for guilty men to control. He didn't confess at first. He rationalized, which, in some ways, is worse. He told me the firm needed innovation, that my idea had potential but no structure, that he refined it, that the market opportunity would have been wasted on someone with no capital and no strategic support. There it was again. The family gospel. You didn't lose because we betrayed you. You lost because we deserved to use what you built more than you did. Then he said the sentence I think I'll remember for the rest of my life. "I honestly thought you'd be done in a year." I looked at him. He kept going. "You were 21, broke, angry, making everything personal. I assumed you'd get tired, take a normal job, and eventually realize Dad was right." The honesty of that hit harder than if he'd shouted. Because he wasn't apologizing. He was explaining the architecture of his cruelty. He stole from me because he expected time to erase me. He didn't think he had to destroy my company. He thought the world would do it for him. And if the world had cooperated, if Nora hadn't taken me in, if my first clients hadn't trusted me, if I had gotten tired at the wrong moment, he would have been right. That's what made it so vicious. Not that he harmed me, that he counted on me disappearing quietly enough to make the theft look natural. Daniel finally got to the part he actually cared about. The firm was being audited internally. There were board tensions, potential exposure around the subsidiary's development timeline. And if I pushed the narrative of idea theft publicly, he would have to defend the family's position. I almost smiled. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." "No," I said softly. "It's fear in a nicer jacket." That made him angry. "You think because you built a modest business you get to rewrite history?" Modest. That word amused me. By then, my company's annual numbers were already strong enough to make his contempt mathematically absurd. Still, I let him keep talking. Because Daniel only ever revealed himself in the overlap between arrogance and panic. "If this goes public," he said, "you won't hurt me. You'll hurt the firm. You'll hurt Mom, Dad, everyone." The familiar structure again. My silence would protect the family. My truth would wound it. As always, his consequences wanted to become my moral burden. I stood. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before building your future out of mine." And for the first time, Daniel's mask slipped. Not grief, not shame, resentment. Pure, ugly resentment. Because men like him do not hate the people they exploit. They hate the people who survive it well enough to become evidence. I thought Daniel came to intimidate me. He didn't. He came because something else had already gone wrong inside the firm. And the next thing I discovered proved that if I did nothing, they weren't just going to lose money, they were going to try to bury the whole collapse under my company's name. Mara found it. Not through hacking, nothing that dramatic, through carelessness. A junior administrator at the family firm, someone who had once interned with me years ago before all of this happened, reached out anonymously after hearing whispers about outside rescue options. The attachment he sent was titled Draft, Strategic Acquisition Pathway. When I opened it, I felt my body go cold. It wasn't a loan structure. It wasn't a neutral merger. It was a plan to absorb my company under distressed asset language, restructure leadership, sideline me within 12 months, and reposition Daniel as executive overseer of integrated digital operations. In short, take my business, use it to stabilize theirs, then push me out of my own creation. My father hadn't just come asking for help. He had come laying groundwork. They weren't reconciling. They were still trying to outmaneuver me. I sat staring at the draft while rain tapped against my office windows. The sheer consistency of it almost felt surreal. Even now, even after disowning me, even after erasing me, even after stealing from me and watching me claw my way into something real, their first instinct wasn't we were wrong. It was how do we use this? I forwarded the draft to my attorney, then to Mara. Then I closed my laptop and looked around my office, the one I had built alone, the one no family money had touched, the one nobody handed me, and understood something with perfect clarity. They were never going to stop. Not emotionally, not strategically. Not until the possibility of using me was dead. And that meant I needed something stronger than refusal. I needed finality. When my parents showed up at my gate years later, they didn't come because they missed me. They came because the plan had failed. And what they asked for at the mansion wasn't money. It was the one thing they thought they still had a right to: access. 10 years is a strange amount of time, long enough for anger to cool, long enough for wounds to scar over, but not long enough to forget the exact moment your life changed. For me, that moment was still clear. My father standing in the living room, pointing at the door. You're a disgrace to this family. 10 years later, I owned a company operating in 12 countries. We had over 200 employees. Our platform supported thousands of independent businesses. The idea my family once mocked had become something real, something powerful, and eventually something very profitable. That's how I bought the mansion. Not for status, not for revenge, just because after 10 years of surviving chaos, I wanted peace. The mansion sat on a quiet hill outside the city, tall black iron gates, a long driveway surrounded by trees. From the main windows you could see the skyline in the distance. It was quiet, safe, a life completely separate from the one I had left behind, which is why the call from my security guard surprised me. 2 people are at the front gate asking for you. I opened the security camera feed, and suddenly my chest tightened, because standing outside the gate were my parents. They looked older. My father's hair had turned almost completely gray. My mother stood slightly behind him, glancing nervously toward the house. Like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there. For a moment, I didn't move. I just watched the screen, because 10 years is enough time for anger to fade, but seeing them again brought something back instantly. Not rage, memory, the suitcase, the rain on the windshield that first night, the sentence that ended everything. You're a disgrace. I walked down the long driveway slowly. The security gate separated us like a border. My father looked up as I approached. His expression was difficult to read. Not proud, not ashamed, just careful. My mother smiled nervously. It's been a long time. That sentence almost made me laugh, because the last time we spoke, they had made it very clear that time between us didn't matter. My father spoke first. We heard about your company. Of course they had. Success has a way of traveling faster than failure, especially in the same professional circles they once used to dismiss me. You built something impressive. Not an apology, not even recognition of what happened, just acknowledgement of results. My mother nodded quickly. We're proud of you. Proud. That word felt strange coming from the people who once believed I would ruin everything. Why are you here? I asked. My father hesitated. Then he finally admitted it. The firm collapsed. The words hung in the air between us. For decades, the accounting firm had been the center of our family identity, the thing they valued more than my dreams, more than my independence, more than me. And now, it was gone. According to my father, Daniel's expansion strategy had destroyed the company faster than anyone expected. Bad investments, unrecoverable debts, legal problems. By the time they realized how serious the situation was, it was already too late. The firm was bankrupt, the building sold, the legacy gone. My mother stepped closer to the gate. You have so much now, she said softly. Family should help family. That sentence echoed strangely in the air, because the last time they used the word family, I was standing outside their front door with a suitcase. My father cleared his throat. We're not asking for charity. Of course they weren't. People like my father never ask for charity. They ask for opportunity. We want to start again, he continued, with your help. There it was. Not love, not reconciliation, a business proposal. Even now, even after everything, they still saw me as an asset. My father straightened his posture. You've proven you can succeed. He gestured toward the house behind me. Imagine what we could build together. For a moment, I just looked at him, because in his mind, this was generosity, an invitation, a chance to bring the family back together. But in reality, it was something else entirely, another attempt to absorb what I built, just like Daniel tried to do years earlier. Then my mother said something that almost worked. You don't have to do it for us. She pointed toward the house. Do it for the family. The word family again, but this time it didn't hurt. Because I had spent 10 years building something better. Friends who stayed when things were hard. Colleagues who believed in me before success. Employees who trusted my vision. I already had a family, just not the one standing outside my gate. I looked at them for a long time. 10 years of memories passing silently between us. Then I said something simple. You told me not to come back. My father's expression tightened. That was years ago. Yes. I nodded slowly. And this is my house. My mother looked hopeful for a moment, like maybe I was about to forgive everything. Instead, I pressed the intercom button. You should leave, I said calmly. My father stared at me. You're really turning your back on your family? I thought about that sentence carefully. Then I answered, no. I'm honoring the moment you turned your back on me. For the first time in my life, My father had no response. They stood outside the gate for a long time. Eventually, they walked back to their car. The engine started, and they drove away. I watched the taillights disappear down the road. Then I turned and walked back toward the house. Not angry, not triumphant, just peaceful. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so strong that when they finally come back, they're no longer part of it.